Mario games are pretty easy. This is true pretty much across the board, and with the main demographic of these games being fairly young, it makes sense to prioritize fun over challenge when designing levels. But this isn't true for all levels. After beating the final boss, you will occasionally unlock an extra set of them that are significantly more difficult than usual. While I was playing through Super Mario 3D World, I started playing a particularly challenging level, which got me thinking, what is the hardest level across all of 3D Mario? When you think of difficult Mario levels, the three major ones that come to mind are Darker Side from Super Mario Odyssey, Grandmaster Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy 2, and Champion's Road from Super Mario 3D World. I decided to play through all of these levels and make note of things like the amount of times I die, the amount of time I spend to complete each level, and my personal thoughts on each stage. Starting off, Darker Side, the final level of Super Mario Odyssey. The level starts off with you on a platform with a bunch of Goombas that are fairly easy to avoid. You then move on to a section that has these bars for you to swing on, before jumping across to these moving platforms. All the sections up until this point are fairly easy once you get a hang of them, but then, little by little, the difficulty starts increasing. This next bit has lava bubbles that you must capture to use to carefully jump between these little lava wells, all while avoiding these rock rollers. Again, this isn't super difficult, but you'll probably end up hitting this roller a few times due to messing up the timing. After that, it's just some basic platforming with an up route. Then comes the frozen underwater section that contains some enemies, and then a part with Yoshi where you have to go between these conveyor belts to dodge enemies, both of which are quite simple. If you want to go a little bit out of your way, you can get your hearts all the way back up to 6 by taking the Sphinx quiz. Next, you have to do some extremely quick and precise parkour while avoiding these boxes. You then capture a glide-on that you use to dodge these flying bugs. Once you land, you have to fling yourself really precisely between these forks, which is actually really difficult due to the fact that some forks require you to throw Cappy extremely precisely to capture them. However, this part is essentially optional because by shaking the controller to stay high enough as glide-on, you can make it over the entire thing. Next, in what is by far the most difficult section of the level, you have to stay on the slowly moving platform while tons of enemies swarm around you. While this doesn't seem very difficult at first, you soon realize that if you throw your cap to kill the enemies and accidentally hit this pulse beam in the middle, it sends out a ring of fire that creates a chain reaction with all the other ones in the vicinity, making it extremely difficult to dodge all of them. Then, after some precise jumps as Pokio to reach the top of here, you enter 2D mode and have to avoid these barrels. After beating Donkey Kong, you enter a pipe back up to the surface where you can jump through this painting and become Bowser. You get all your health back for this final stage where you break rocks and jump around in a moon cave, similar to the one where you beat the game. Now, all these levels might seem fairly easy separately, but when you consider the fact that you have to do all of these one after another, and that if you fall off or lose all your health, you have to restart from the very beginning, it gets a lot harder. I've played a lot of Super Mario Odyssey and have beaten this level multiple times, so I was able to complete it within an hour, which takes us to Grandmaster Galaxy in Super Mario Galaxy 2. Specifically the Perfect Run variant. This alternate version of the level is practically the exact same thing, but instead of having 3 lives, you have 1. This makes the level significantly harder because now if you mess up at all, you get instantly sent back to the beginning. Grandmaster Galaxy has a total of 6 different parts, all of them harder than the last. The first one is a section with Yoshi where you need to swing across the level and avoid the various obstacles. From there, you go to an area where you have to flip these panels to yellow, all while these enemies try to shoot you with lasers. This next section has a bunch of lasers that you have to move through using these clouds. After that, you get moved into this area with a ton of flip panels, disappearing ground, and laser ring makers. Then you need to use these blue pole stars to make your way through another difficult laser maze. Then you get to the final level where you need to dodge hammers and make your way to these boomerang bros, kill them, and beat the level. The first section is a lot more difficult than it looks, because the angle that you need to pull yourself at to avoid some of these obstacles is extremely precise, and even if you do get past all the ones in your way, sometimes you just get swung into another enemy right behind it, which is completely impossible to avoid. The switch section is actually pretty easy, because as long as you stay moving, the lasers will pretty much never hit you. Then you move on to what is probably my favorite section in any Mario level ever, the Cloud Laser section. This level looks really weird. The lasers aren't aligned with anything at all and are at the most random orientations ever. It honestly looks like the person in charge of designing this level just booted up MS Paint and started drawing lines all over the place. This one was pretty hard when I was starting out, but after going through it so many times, I got insanely good at it and was able to go through it top speed while perfectly dodging the lasers. This did cause me to die here every once in a while, but it was definitely worth it. The next section was the killer of a majority of my attempts. There were just so many things to keep in mind and watch out for, and even if you mess up even once, you get instantly sent back to the beginning and have to do all the earlier sections again just to immediately die to a laser in the exact same spot. The pole laser star area isn't particularly difficult, but when you do mess up, it's really annoying. Then comes the final part with the Hammer Bros. There's very little room for error, and sometimes even when you don't make an error, the game still punishes you for it. It got to the point where I had done the earlier levels so many times I could do them flawlessly and then still die on the final one and have to spend another 5 minutes getting all the way back to the place I was at. After over 7 hours, I finally beat it and moved on to the final level of the video, Champions Road. When I booted up Super Mario 3D World, I was expecting to be able to unlock this level fairly quickly. I mean, I've already beaten the entire game and most of the bonus levels, how hard could it be? After beating the last few levels, the final world didn't unlock, and upon investigating further, I realized that not only do you have to beat all the levels leading up to it, you need to collect every green star, get every stamp, and get the top of the flagpole for every level in the entire game. After spending an absurd amount of time doing this, I finally unlocked Champions Road. You start off in an area with some moving platforms and some enemies that shoot cannonballs at you. From there, you go across a few more similar areas filled with enemies before hitting the orange teleport box. You get transported to an area with these extremely fast switching blocks that you have to climb to get to the first green star. Next, you get shot out of a cannon and land on this platform with 3 Magic Koopas, falling floor, and fire bars. Once you kill all the enemies in this area, another orange box appears, bringing you to the next section. This next part of the level is filled with a whole ton of swinging spike poles and ink enemies that you have to avoid to collect the next star. Then you have to climb up this huge tower by bouncing on these ants and then do the same thing with these piranha plants. Once at the top, you have to complete a water maze with a ton of moving spike blocks before getting launched out of a cannon onto the final section. The last area is completely covered in boosts with an insane amount of laser rings moving around all over the place. The final green star is here, along with 5 orange keys needed to unlock the final orange box that brings you to the flagpole. There are no power-ups on Champions Road, but it is possible to smuggle them in from other levels. I decided not to do this, however, because it kinda seems like cheating, and I also wasn't able to bring in any power-ups for the other levels anyways. Compared to the other levels, Champions Road feels a lot less smooth to play. Instead of dying to really precise jumps or a ton of enemies firing at me, it was more just jumps that seemed like they were off. For example, this section was really frustrating because I always had to keep backtracking during my jumps to avoid overshooting, and after thinking about it, it makes sense. I am playing on the Nintendo Switch version of the game, which gives players a significant speed boost when compared to the Wii U version, which the game originally released on. The beat blocks were also really annoying because there's no really good way to complete this section. The end section where you have to jump off the piranha creepers and ants also felt really janky and weird. It was really hard to get a decent bounce because of the strange and precise timing you have to jump with. But after only about 4.5 hours, I was able to complete the level. Before I go over my final results, please make sure you're subscribed if you like this sort of content. I really don't like asking people to sub in the middle of a video, but less than 3% of my viewers are subscribed, which is bad, so if you could please help to increase that number, I would be really grateful. For deaths, Champions Road had the most with 298, then came Grandmaster at a total of 211, and then Darker Side with a staggering 7. I feel like we need to address the Darker Side discrepancy. Darker Side is the only one of these levels that I've beaten more than once, and I'm really familiar with Super Mario Odyssey, so it's definitely a lot harder than this statistic makes it look, but I still don't think it comes close to the difficulty of Champions Road or Grandmaster. Now, does this automatically mean that Champions Road is the most difficult? Well, not necessarily. Most of my deaths on Champions Road were due to me trying to experiment with different methods of completing the earlier sections faster, or just failing simple jumps because of impatience. Therefore, I'm going to give the title of hardest Mario level to Grandmaster Galaxy: The Perfect Run. This is not only because it took me twice as long to beat it, but because of the sheer precision required to complete the level and the fact that you only get 1 life in Grandmaster, whereas in Champions Road you can take 2 hits before dying, or even the equivalent of 5 if you smuggle smuggle in items, which most people do. Not even to mention the fact that some parts can be totally cheesed with the Tanuki Leaf or Cat Bell. I definitely recommend trying to play some of these levels yourself, because while it was frustrating dying constantly, I still had a ton of fun.